I saw this post last year that drove me crazy. If you're not using AI, you should feel FOMO. And it was this very and it got so many views, engagement, and it was a big thing. And then all these other people posting about it. You're right. You should feel FOMO if you're not using AI. And I just hated that this shame-based messaging of you're not in the in club.
Well, welcome back to the AI Mixtape. I'm Katie Branley.
And I'm Dr. Ericka Pittman.
And today, Dr. Ericka, we are very excited because it is our first guest on the mixtape. Hello, welcome, Marie. Oh,
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and to chat with you both today.
my gosh. Well, I'm going to say some really nice things about you, which it's not very hard to say nice things about you. And then we will get into it because we're really excited to just learn more about what you're doing up in Humboldt, California.
Great.
Awesome. All right. So today we have our very first guest on the show, and she is someone who is doing something that we don't hear enough about. She took 15 years of big tech experience and she brought it home to her hometown of Humboldt, California, home of the redwoods and the ocean. And I would say calm, but she is also wrangling 2 toddlers and she's a founder of a company, Grounded AI. She is passionate about identifying the tech gaps that exist in rural areas and building a bridge to learning, info, and the tech that people need. She is the founder of Grounded AI, an AI consulting and learning firm that helps businesses implement AI where it makes sense for them. So let's dig in. So I wanted to start, Marie, with just kind of, you moved back home to Humboldt County about a year ago. And so help our listeners picture sort of what is life like right now?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. And thank you for the introduction. So Humboldt County, California, for context, is a rural county 300 miles north of San Francisco. So it's about a 5-hour drive up the coast, surrounded by Redwood National Park, redwood trees, fog, a beautiful ocean. It's just a very peaceful, relaxing area. People love to go hiking here. There's a lot of farms, and we have a farmers market every Saturday. That's incredible. And there's just a very rich sense of community here. We have a university, Cal Poly Humboldt. We have a thriving artist community. There's just a lot of events, especially during the summer, and it's a really great place to be. I grew up here and moved away in 2007. Lived in Boston for 7 years, then San Diego for 7 years, and then most recently Austin, Texas. So just all over the place, worked at different tech companies there. And as far as what life is like now, I'm just so grateful. It's busy. I drive to customers in person. I think when you're talking about something like AI and emerging technology, people don't want to be on a Zoom call talking about it. It's really nice to be able to sit down in person. And so I drive around a lot. Last week, I drove all the way out to Willow Creek, which is about an hour east of here in the mountains. And it's absolutely beautiful. It's just a small town of 1,000 folks, and spoke to the Chamber of Commerce there. And so I'm really grateful that through Grounded AI, I've been able to just meet so many people, meet so many local business owners, university leaders, learn about how they're thinking about AI, because, it's one of those really altering things that changes our lives on every level. And I think I kind of said that to you in that write-up, but it's just, on a personal level, on a community level, but also on a national and international level, we're talking about it. So it's just amazing that I could be having this conversation with you both on the East Coast, and I'm over in Northern California, and we're talking about the same thing. So
yeah, I'm interested in that. You mentioned a couple things. If someone doesn't know Humboldt, that they would have hear, and the things that jump out are major university, not close, but they're going to hear San Francisco, within the vicinity of the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. These are the things that people are going to think about. And that is a part of the world, but also Humboldt there's kind of a gap there, right?
such a gap. Culturally, you don't say, it's we're not the Bay Area. And they say they're Northern California. They're not Northern California. There's a very specific kind of cultural pride that comes with living in this area. When I meet people, they're like, well, how'd you end up here in Humboldt County? It's a question people ask a lot. And to say, oh, well, I grew up here, it's this immediate oh, okay.
So then the filter goes down. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but we see the Bay Area as, the big city. They don't understand our slower paced way of life. I do think there is a very strong sense of yeah, our culture specifically on the North Coast specifically.
So, okay, so then let's dig into that a little bit because you are from there. You knew, and when you moved back, you did so very intentionally. You had, your two children. You said you wanted them to have, many of the things that you had growing up. So when you worked in Boston and when you worked in tech, you kind of mentioned, you assumed when you moved back to Humboldt, you didn't assume that you would be bringing your tech background and be doing that in Humboldt, correct?
Not at all. Yeah, I thought I would be looking for a remote job based in the Bay Area or Seattle or anywhere else because I just didn't think there was a need for my type of experience. I hadn't really thought about local firms. When you're insulated in cities and the world of, SaaS companies and startups, you just think very, okay, I'm building this software product for marketing teams at enterprise companies, or I'm building this software product for veterinarians, or just giving any of those kind of examples. And you don't think about small town construction firms or plumbing companies using software. But the fact is everyone uses software today pretty much in some form or another. So that's been really cool to see that there really was a need for my experience in a way I never could have anticipated.
So what opened your eyes? What opened your eyes to that? Like, the universe sort of sent you this, probably kept sending you messages that said, hey, look, what you are doing in these big cities for big firms in big tech is needed in Humboldt. And by the way, Marie, you're just the person to do it. So tell us about, how did you kind of start Grounded AI in Humboldt?
Yeah, I was, thinking back to last summer, was doing some remote consulting work and working with clients on the East Coast and all over the place, middle of the country. And I went to a coffee shop. We have a lot of really amazing local coffee shops and places to get lunch. And I was getting some coffee. And then there was a wall of flyers because in our town, people still use flyers for marketing all the time.
Mm.
And
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw this flyer that said, Startup Humboldt, you could win $200,000. And I just immediately jumped out to me the word startup. I'm like, startup? That's not a word I expected to see here. And looked at the flyer, saw that there was a place called Startup Humboldt. They were really hyping up this $200,000 competition. I never once considered that for myself. I don't know I just thought, that's for big companies and that's for, anyone else. I'm just doing this consulting work remotely. And then it was having a meeting with someone at Lost Coast Ventures and having this conversation about my skill set and experience. And he said, you should really apply. We have a micro venture track for this competition. And I think it would be great if you submit an application. Individual at Lost Coast Ventures who just said, we need to take all of your experience. At that point, the work I was doing was very scattered. I was doing product management coaching for PMs in the Bay Area. I was doing consulting for startups on the East Coast. Like I was just kind of all over the place. It was like, we need to take your skill set and your experience and bring it all to Humboldt County. And I think having that just visualization and that validation too from someone who knew the area and who had the experience he had, I was able to say, oh, there is a need for my experience. And now I just need to figure out how I talk about it. And I think then getting that specificity as a next step and saying, okay, I'm just going to go all in on helping Humboldt County businesses.
Yeah. Do you think that businesses in your area, because we hear this a lot, everybody, whenever it comes up, hey, we train people in AI, we're interested in AI implementation. I mean, the first thing almost everybody says to this, and Ericka, you could probably speak to it too, is like, that's right, AI, like, oh yeah, that's right, I need to do that. Like, it's a thing on their to-do list that they're just, they say like, oh, I just haven't gotten around to it. Do you see that sort of in your community with the businesses that you're working with?
Yeah, I definitely see that reaction all the time. Yeah, not just in my community, but everywhere. And I do think that that's also a big part of the reason they feel that way is the tech industry's fault. I've seen so many LinkedIn influencers, folks who are like AI influencers. And it's like, I saw this post last year that drove me crazy. I won't name names, but someone who's very, influential, prolific in the space saying, if you're not using AI, you should feel FOMO. And it was this very it got so many views, engagement, and like it was a big thing. And then all these other people posting about it. You're right. You should feel FOMO if you're not using AI. And I just hated that this shame-based messaging of like, you're not in the in club. The unfortunate thing is that that kind of messaging is effective because then that kind of trickles down and everyone starts to feel like, oh, I'm never doing enough. Even folks in the industry every day constantly feel like they don't know enough. They don't know this tool versus this tool versus this tool. And I just want us to be in an environment, and I'm sure you feel similarly, where we're promoting AI literacy in a non-judgmental space and everyone's learning things at their own pace. And there's no right or wrong way to learn these new concepts because it's so new for everyone. And I try to tell that to business owners too, who come to me saying, I just feel like so overwhelmed by everything out there and everything I don't know. And I just remind them that this technology is so new. The experts have been doing this for just a few years, not decades. Generative AI, as we know it in its form, was, ChatGPT launching at the end of 2022. And most people first learned about ChatGPT in 2023. So it's fairly new. No one's an expert unless you're a machine learning scientist who has been studying this for decades and decades. And there's just a handful of them, but those aren't the people you see on LinkedIn posting about, FOMO. So they've also only been doing this for a few years.
Well, it's just this kind of dynamic between like national and local, right? Or national and regional. And so I try to stay tapped into like what's going on in the national news. And so like Sam Altman last week dialed back sort of like, oh yeah, AI. By now I thought more white collar jobs would be gone. And he's sort of backpedaling on everything he had said previously. And, a lot of the articles I read said, well, but saying that AI will take your job is, clickbait. It's exactly what people will pay attention to. Right?
Fear
So
monger. Yeah.
yeah, definitely some fear mongering. And so I think for us, definitely, and it seems like for you as well, like that is not something that we want to be associated with our brand. And it's interesting because in your local area, I think what I'm seeing and things are kind of specific to the culture. I'm here to help you people. I can bring you all the software knowledge that you need and AI knowledge. But yeah, you are specifically positioned. I think there's a little pocket sort of where we are in South Carolina of like interest in entrepreneurship and all those types of things. And I think it's nice that we're being offered a seat at the table and we're being sort of allowed to speak up and say, this is what's working in our corner of the world. And I think that's how we're going to train the larger models better. We're going to give it more context. We're going to give a real world application in the workplace. And I'm excited to see what happens, but absolutely, like you have to kind of cut out the noise a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a really prolific speaker come to Cal Poly Humboldt a few months ago. His name's Jaron Lanier, and he's a principal scientist at Microsoft. He's the person who invented and coined the term virtual reality in the 80s. But he had pointed out, I've met these CEOs, these companies, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and he's like, and they're not very technical people. They don't really understand, AI on a technical level. And he obviously does. He's very technical. And that was really illuminating because for me, I think the idea that he had a few months ago was just, yeah, the fact that LLMs are an amalgamation of human expression, human data, all of, billions and billions of pieces of our own, data. And that's what makes it so powerful. And I think that framing to me really helped me as far as how I think about, the work I'm doing as a human enablement tool, not a human replacement tool.
I love
Okay,
that.
so let's hang here for just like a quick second because I think that's how we see the world too. And I think the interesting thing that you just identified there is how different this AI revolution is from maybe some previous revolutions. Not to say that there's not a lot of similarities and touch points that we can learn from, but sometimes what we encounter is it's as if we are trying to unsilo like AI from the tech because the models that we have from before are, Eric and I compare this a lot to we were in education, we were teachers at the time that STEM became a thing and it was the craze and every kid needed to know how to code and things like that. But it was still very much confined to the lane of computer science, right? We build so many more coders and then the economy will catch up. And I think what you're identifying, what a lot of people are identifying is, okay, this is different. This will touch everyone. Everyone will need to upskill into AI, not just the people in tech. And also that AI is not, and we talk about this a lot, AI is not a tech problem, it's a communication problem. You'll need to learn how to use this. And so that's what I find, it's so interesting that you mentioned that a lot of people that are at the forefront are these non-techie tech people. What would you consider yourself? Because you came from the tech industry. What would you consider yourself? Or do you consider yourself kind of like this hybrid person? Because I do think the AI revolution needs hybrid people. So
Yeah, it's hard to I don't know. I think it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to a software engineer, then absolutely not. I'm not technical. Those changes that would happen along with the customer value into clear documentation. And I was told that as a product manager, my documentation was always very strong. I think I'm a whatever the opposite of auditory learner is. I'm a very reading, writing first. And so yeah, somewhere in between.
well, and now your work it's really people driven, right? Because you can know the tech, but you have to be able to then
Yeah.
listen to businesses that you're going into, people who are not maybe don't even see themselves as the consumer of AI. So what are you hearing in the market? You go into businesses, what are their challenges? What are their needs? What is the gap?
Yeah. And I will say too that that customer piece is also just product management. I see that as an extension of everything I was doing before because you have to deeply understand and empathize with customer pain points to be a good product manager. If you can't back up the work that you're proposing to change in the software with user data, analytics, customer interviews, quotes, like you need all of that to build it out. And so I think I'm very good at understanding customer pain points, not taking it verbatim and figuring out with my technical skill set, then what needs to change in the software to solve their pain point that they're experiencing. And so to answer your question about what am I hearing, I think right now I'd say two main streams. The first is solo entrepreneurs locally, realtors, contractors, folks that are operating a 1 to 2 person business and are wearing every single hat of their organization, drafting social media posts, client communication. There's just so many things that they need to keep track of, and they're feeling overwhelmed by that. And so, how can you use AI to automate some of those tasks, streamline, the work they're doing, build in skills in Claude Code or Codex so that, any, social media posts that go out every week and are in this specific format, that's captured so they save time and it's not just a back and forth with ChatGPT or Claude, because that's what you see a lot of today is I'm going back and forth, having to give them the same context every time. The output's very generic sounding. And so it's kind of taking that next step into actually automating and improving the output through that automation and skill creation. And then the second work stream is larger firms in industries you wouldn't expect, or at least that I wouldn't have expected at the beginning. Like I touched on earlier, it's like construction and just other industries, manufacturing with physical products. They all use software and they have very complex, systems that need to talk to each other and that don't always have the same data living in the same places. And so how do you kind of operationalize and streamline the work they're doing using like AI powered workflows? So that's kind of the other larger example.
Yeah, and I think Katie and I see a lot of that, like that one-off use. I need to write an email and do something quickly, but I think one of the areas that we sort of feel like can be challenging, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about it, Marie, is getting people to buy into taking the time to building the process. It takes time away from like what you said, like if you're in a product-based business, you're not on the manufacturing floor, you're not able to address all those other responsibilities. And so it seems like it can be challenging to get people to stop and take the time to build the workflow. I don't know if you've experienced any of that.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to having data and customer examples ready
Mhm.
to be able to tell someone, this process that used to take hours or weeks for someone to do with this process I'm building out, it now will take 10 to 12 minutes for an agentic workflow to go through that entire process. And that way you're just reviewing it at the end, making any changes, sending it off, in this case, like an estimation workflow. And when I did my startup Humboldt pitch, I talked about a contractor example, spending 40 hours a week on a scope of work that may or may not end in, work. It would just be putting him in the bidding war. And so it's work he needs to do, but it's also taking time away from construction jobs. With an automated workflow, now it's going to take him 30 minutes to review this SOW over his lunch break. And so being able to really give examples and time savings, then it's like, oh, well, I can spend half a day on this if it leads to that, you know what I mean? Like if that's what's possible, then it's absolutely worth the investment and half a day right now. Because the
It's a
way I
buy-in.
structure it, what was that?
That's a powerful buy-in if you can save that much time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the way I structure it is I do a half day session with someone if it's just a solo entrepreneur and I set up Cloud Code or Codex for them. They'll send me materials beforehand and I'll build out some first pass skills or routines. And then during that time, then we'll go over them and test and iterate. And so they know that by the end of the session, they'll have, working skills or routines that they can kind of take into their day to day business.
It's awesome.
You balance those two things because I think it's such an interesting learning, right? It's because AI is something that I think people are like, okay, give me the thing, right? Give me the button to push and I'll push the button and I want the time savings. But along with that, like as you mentioned, this isn't, hey, I built it for you and it's a 30-minute how-to session. This is a half-day session with a small business owner. So how do you balance those two things of giving them, what you leave behind is not, a capital expenditure. You're not leaving behind like a truck for their construction company. You're leaving behind something that they also have to have some literacy, some knowledge about in order to operate. What do you find breeds success in that?
Yeah, accountants know accounting workflows better than I ever will. And if I can enable an accountant to use Cloud Code confidently, they know how to set things up, they know how to connect everything, then the types of reports and financial analyses they can run using it will be incredible. So I do focus on it's pretty training heavy and catered to them. And I think that customization is what makes it kind of worth their time. I also offer larger workshops with local organizations and chambers of commerce. But yeah, I think that one on one work and taking the time to sit down with them, answer any questions, and have documentation that's specific to them after our session is what makes it so valuable and worth their time and investment.
One of the things you mentioned when you sent us sort of what's going on for Ground AI was you mentioned they're not the resistant people, like that maybe they don't see themselves yet as an AI user, but that's a pretty easy bump to get over to you can pretty quickly change their minds about that, but they're not resistant to it. They're actually pretty excited. Like that's not what you're saying.
Everyone I've talked to is already using AI on the business owner side. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're just using ChatGPT or Claude Chat usually.
These like random acts of AI, we kind of call them.
Yeah, where it's just, oh, I just go back and forth with ChatGPT and this is what I do today, but I don't have anywhere to save it. And it's not very, I'm not saving a lot of time just going back and forth to
Yeah.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think that they're so excited about it? Whereas, you encounter resistance in other areas of your life, and I'd love to or in other areas of your world,
Yeah.
I'd love you to speak to that. But why do you think that there's such a difference?
Yeah. I love this question. And I think AI is such an all encompassing term. It's like so broad, it almost doesn't mean anything. And so when you think about what AI means to a business owner, it means time saving, increased efficiency, being able to hire more and grow their business because all of these tasks that used to take time away from the work they love to do now can happen, exponentially faster. For college students, for artists, writers, they don't see it that way at all. They see it as AI generated art taking work from artists, taking away, what I put out into the world that gives me and my identity inherent value. And they see, authors will see, AI generated fiction. And you see these things in the news, and the thing like these are all covered very heavily in the news. And so you'll see this headline about there was this guy that wrote a book about like truth and AI, and they found that that the quotes were, like, hallucinated and
So
not
they weren't even real. No one really actually said it.
Yeah, some of them were real, but others were not, and they went to the people who were cited, and they're like, "I never said that," and it was literally AI making things up. And so when you see things like that, you're like, "Oh, that's not a good look. That's not great." I understand. I understand why people reading that would say AI is not good. This is not why. How is this providing value if it's just making things up and I'm reading things I don't know what's real anymore? And then college students have a huge concern in AI, and I do think it's legitimate. And yeah, I was having a conversation with someone at the university who was like, "How are you getting business? I don't understand when the sentiment around AI is so negative." And it's
Mm.
the
Oh, that's
people
interesting.
she's talking to, I'm like, we're
Yeah.
in totally different worlds.
Mhm.
And I told her about going to a Chamber of Commerce mixer and saying this is months ago and saying, oh, yeah, I do AI consulting. And I had a hard time saying that at first because I was afraid of backlash. And I said, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I know it's controversial. And a business owner at the Chamber mixer was like, what do you mean? What are you talking?
Well, I didn't even know that they should
Yeah.
be.
Didn't
That there
even know
was
it was
anything that they should be.
Controversy.
yeah, and so that's the level of just stark just difference and polarization between these two worlds, and I went to a discussion on AI at a local arts center, and there were a lot of people there who were very, not huge fans of AI, but some things surfaced there, stories about how it's harmed them or harmed others. AI chatbots can be very addictive and you you read things about it, but when you hear about things like that firsthand, then you really understand, like, okay, if you're a very young person and these chatbots came out when you were just a teenager, you were like 14, 15, like you saw other people form dependency on AI chatbots or you did yourself, like that is powerful. And I can understand why psychologically at that age, you would have a lot of just wariness and caution around AI because that's the first thing you think of. But I guess the long winded way of answering that is just, yeah, to kind of TLDR that it's just everyone has a different lens and a different definition of what AI is, whether it's a chatbot or AI art and for business owners, that's a very different thing. And I think that's why the opinions are so different.
I think that brings me to really what kind of what I want to know about with grounded AI, because you are in a community that, and you gave some, good statistics about Humboldt County. 40% of the people live below the California median income, right? Quarter of the residents are on food stamps. It just gives a different perspective to your work that I feel like are rooted in the idea that you have to go in and listen deeply to the people that you're going to be working with. So how does that shape how you do this work and not making it a one size fits all, here's what everybody needs about AI?
Just folks. I think, well, going back to that discussion I had at the art collective, like, let me be clear, I was terrified to go there. I was afraid I'd be
Mm,
like chased out of the building. I was like, how am I going to go to this intense discussion about AI and say, oh, I work in AI? It's like, are they just going to side eye me? And I was so nervous. But I think something that social media does that isn't great is amplify a polarization. And it's only going to show you the most controversial sides on either side. And I think that makes these discussions worse is when you have them virtually because going in person to this artist collective,
mm,
like my experience was so positive. No one was mean to me. They were happy I was there. They had very different opinions about AI than I did, but no, it was a very like productive and kind conversation. And so I think there is a benefit to doing the work I do on a local level because people know like I'm just another community member here and I'm here because I want to raise my kids and I want to build a brighter economic future for our community because like you mentioned those statistics are real and it's on everyone's minds here of how do we create more jobs locally, how do we build more sustainable businesses. And so that's kind of at the forefront of my philosophy as a company and what I do. I'm only hiring local employees. Like I'm
mm,
not looking at remote hires because any hire that I bring on, I will train them, give them knowledge in AI. They'll then be able to impart that knowledge to other community members. It's just going to make build greater economic resilience, one employee at a time and one local business at a time. And so I focus on the economic empowerment and the cascading effect that these changes can have throughout our community if we, use these tools in the right way.
Yeah. So, and what was the gap that you saw? Because I mean, as we mentioned, like a lot of super positive things and people who are ready to do it, ready to embrace AI, and then other people who are going slower and being thoughtful about it. But you did say when in your pre-stuff when we were talking was when you came back to Humboldt, you did see a gap, right? Like what do you feel like is the gap? And you've done such a nice job on other platforms and things of just defining that.
The rural tech gap.
Yeah, the rural tech gap. I mean, I don't think we talk about
I was waiting for this. I was like, we have
yeah.
to go back. Yeah.
Yeah, I just
Oh
don't
my
think that
gosh.
that's something that gets talked about enough. So,
Yeah.
love to hear your perspective and what you saw. And I mean, even just defining it for people who have never, I'm certain that the majority of people who are not living in a rural community ever think about this.
Yeah.
Yes, I was like looking for statistical data because I'm like a little bit of a data nerd, and there isn't that much out there even as far as the gap between like rural and urban and even just broadband resources and those types of things. So I was like really looking forward to hearing what you had to say about it because there isn't enough out there information for people to be informed about it.
Yeah. No, and I think, yeah, like you said, there isn't a lot of data out there. I had to verify this before I said it, but so 20% of Americans live in rural areas. And I'm just seeing this now. Urban areas make up only 3% of the entire land area of the country, but are home to more than 80% of the population. That's
Right.
interesting.
So,
97%.
what?
Yeah. True. The rural tech gap. It's interesting the timing of when I left and when I came back because I left Humboldt County in 2007, moved to Boston. I was insulated in this world for a long time and I'd come back home to visit, come back home to Humboldt, but, and I noticed like the Wi-Fi was never the best and just things like that. Cell service, you can't rely on cell service. Even when I'm driving from my home to pick up my daughter from daycare, there's areas where cell service it just cuts out. And then moving back home in 2025 after, AI has come out, all these things are happening. And it was just things that you wouldn't really think about, like Google Maps, you just take for granted it's just going to work. And here it was just wrong half the time. It's literally still wrong half the time, where it'll just give the completely wrong directions that take a million times longer, give the wrong exit on the freeway. It's
Really? Do you still follow it though? Like when it does? Or do you are you doing
sometimes if it's a brand new location, I need to get there, but then I sometimes just won't listen to it. I'm like, oh well, that street doesn't make sense. I'm gonna take this street, but at least I can see where, the destination is. But yeah, it's not accurate consistently. We don't have Uber on a broad scale here or DoorDash, they're very limited.
Mhm.
Technically we have it. It's just kind of limited. I think, yeah. Oh, that was the big one was Google listings. And so going to search when a restaurant's going to be open, people don't post consistent hours or accurate hours. And
Interesting.
so you'll have to call them, you'll have to call to make a reservation at a restaurant, just things like that. And so people will consistently say like, oh, we're 10 to 20 years behind here in Humboldt County. And yeah, in Austin, I would do Amazon same day delivery. I'd order
Sure.
paper
Oh
towels
yeah.
at 9 in the morning and it would be there by noon. And I just got used to that. And now it's like, oh, well, I have to drive to get paper towels. If I try to order paper towels on Amazon, it's going to take me 5 to 7 days to get those paper towels. It's not a same day thing.
Yeah.
And so it's all those kind of things that you just take for granted living in cities that just don't exist. And I never thought about those things until I moved and realized that. And I've gotten used to it now. I don't use Amazon really. I'm used to driving to the grocery store now. I do grocery delivery all the time too. When I lived in Austin, like they just do your shopping for you. And there's a giant superstore chain in Texas called HEB, and it's a great app, and you just order things, and then someone delivers it to you in like an hour, and it does all your grocery shopping for you. It's like we don't have that here, and all of those things kind of sound a little trite, I guess, but I think it became my kind of knowledge base of, okay, there's a real gap here. And with AI, the stakes are higher and things are moving so much quicker than I've seen in just my time working in tech. And so I could see this gap that was already here just exponentially widen with AI and how fast everything's changing. And that's really what became my inspiration for starting Grounded AI.
Well, and like the other thing you mentioned is, and nobody is coming to solve any of those problems, not solve any of those problems, but no one's even thinking about that unless you are living there and affected by it. You said AI sits at every level of society simultaneously, hyper local, national, international, deeply personal. And then you really talked about, let's not let somebody else define this for us, right? So let's not let tech bros, Silicon Valley, the elites make these decisions for us. We all deserve a seat at the table, which I just know that Eric and I feel so passionately about as well. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we just say, like, just get on AI, start talking to it, train it, for who it is. But I think this goes hand in hand with that, with what, with why I think it's a mission for you. You can tell that Grounded AI is not just you're passionate about bringing AI knowledge to people, but you're passionate about bringing it to people in Humboldt and in communities like Humboldt County, because like you said, you all know what you need. And if somebody doesn't bring it there, we're going to get AI solutions for the world, but we might not get the solutions. No one is going to see this gap unless they're doing it from this place, right? So maybe speak to that. Like, why does that make this such a mission for you that's so close to your heart?
Yeah. And I see that as applying to rural areas or just areas that aren't part of those main, few cities. I feel like that applies everywhere. Like I've spoken to folks who are hyper local in Boston and building AI that's, very Boston specific, area specific, and you both being in South Carolina. And like, I just think this can apply to so many places, this idea. I think it's changed now where you now have the ability with AI to have custom implementations. I spoke to a company a few months ago, and they're a Bay Area based company, and their entire business model is providing AI implementation services. They don't have a specific product, and they partner with OpenAI and Anthropic, and it's all services and implementation, because what these large companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, have found is like we can keep pushing out new frontier models and new announcements about new products, but there is a legitimate gap, not just in Humboldt County, but everywhere between
Yeah,
the
sure.
software and the people using it every day. And so they use other companies, and this company, Tried AI is what they're called. They are just doing incredibly well. They haven't received funding to date, and they're a very successful company. And so this model is obviously needed. And then I've seen things in the news about OpenAI acquiring like AI consultant firms.
Mhm.
And I think that long term, their model is going to include some level of going out to businesses and training these businesses on how to use AI. And I think it's only inevitable that at some point they'll come to rural areas and find every business they can, capture as much of the market as they can. And I think there's a risk to that. I don't think we want to give all of our, trust to OpenAI or Anthropic or any other large tech company. And so I think the model of Grounded AI could apply to so many communities of just empower local folks with AI knowledge. And it sounds like you all are doing that in South Carolina,
Mhm.
so that when these big tech companies do come in, folks are empowered with the right information and know how to make decisions for themselves on how they think AI should or shouldn't be used. And I just think that that's so important right now, because these companies have so much money, so much power, and it sounds silly, but I do really believe that knowledge is power. And the more knowledge we have about AI, the better equipped we'll be going into the future.
To demand what we need, really.
Yeah, to understand what this technology means for us, because
Mhm.
they're not thinking through our lens. Like we're thinking through our lens of how this technology can best apply to us. And I've spoken to folks who want absolutely nothing to do with AI ever, and they hate it. They unilaterally think it's terrible, but they've never dug into what it is. They just know they hate it. And I
Yeah.
think there's
Mm.
some risk to that, because you want yeah, I mean, the way I see it is learn about it, understand it, and then decide if you want to use it or not, or how you want to use it, or where you don't want to use it, things like that. So,
And so I think that I think that's so important and so different than what we have scaled people into before or scaled them up to before, because there is a level of just prerequisite knowledge that I think if you're going to be an informed consumer of this, which I think everyone needs to be, and I think that's sort of what you highlighted. So just, we always want to give our guests kind of the last word, but, and you kind of touched on this, but like if someone is skeptical about AI or listening to this conversation, maybe something's shifted for them, what would you want them to take away?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that question. And I touched on that in my notes a little bit. And I think what I would want to have as the takeaway would be like, don't buy into the polarization. Because I do think people who are outside of the tech world see tech workers as being unilaterally pro AI for everything. And they'll see a few news articles online and think that everyone who works in tech is just saying to use AI no matter what. And I don't think that that couldn't be further from the truth. There's so much nuance. There's so many great people that work in tech who want to use it with discernment and use it appropriately. And I want to find a way to bridge the gap between those two worlds so that there's more, mutual understanding. And I'm very grateful that I've been able to kind of post about my experiences in rural Humboldt County to LinkedIn, because that's where a lot of my professional network in the cities, they live, and they'll read about it and learn more. And I hope to be a tech person living in Humboldt County who can lend a different kind of voice and show the nuance that can exist with technology. I think oftentimes people just, like I touched on earlier, equate the technology with these, 5 individuals, the Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and they just think tech equals these 4 men. And there's so much more nuance than that. And so that's kind of my takeaway.
Well, I mean, as and everything else in this conversation, right? You've shined the light so much bigger than kind of what we're seeing. And I think that that's what you're doing with the work of Grounded AI. You're bringing that message to people. You're definitely just so why we started this podcast, to hear these voices and to, as you said, right, that this technology is for everybody. It does not belong to one specific type of person or one industry. It's not siloed there. It's everybody's tech. So we appreciate it. And we just so appreciate hearing about how you're doing this work. So grounded, listening in your real community, real nuance, real work. And I mean, I'm just like, my cup is so full about having you on today. So really,
thank you both so much. This has been such a great conversation. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time. And we will see you next week.